Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Showing Up to Your Life podcast and YouTube channel. My name is Art Burns, and I'm here on a very warm Denver, I almost said December, warm Denver morning here. Yesterday, we were well into the 90s, and I think we're going to get there again today. It's about 85 or so out there now. Just looked at the weather and saw that, and so today's a day for me to be practicing some acceptance and really kind of, being mindful of the difficulty that comes with that really warm weather, right? These are, so much of what we talk about here in this podcast, about showing up to life, right? The ability to really be there with what's happening as it's happening, right? So, so when we, so much of our life is impacted by the decision making that we do, right? The decisions that we make. Let me say it that way, right? Because what happens is the decisions that we make, they all have consequences, right? When we decide to take a certain action, right, that action is either going to benefit us or it can either be a positive, a negative, or a neutral, right? But very seldomly is it really neutral, right? I mean, sure, there are some decisions that you make that are completely innocuous and don't have any real impact on anything, like, having that, even like having that extra cup of coffee, that is going to have consequences of some sort, right? Maybe you're not going to sleep so well tonight, right? So my point that I'm trying to make here is that when the decisions that we make, right, are always going to be either they're always going to be a balancing, right? There's going to be some benefit to every decision. There's going to be some drawback to every decision. There's going to be some things that are, very obviously beneficial. There's going to be things that are obviously not beneficial. And there's going to be a lot of things that are sort of a combination thereof, right? Like having that cup of coffee is a good thing right now, right? It's going to get me through this meeting, but I'm going to sacrifice a good night's sleep later. So the question is, what's more important, right? And so the really, this very clumsy, awkward example that I've drawn for you here, the real key and what really matters with the decisions that we make, right, are we making those decisions mindfully? Right? Are we making those decisions with weighing? Okay, yeah, this cup of coffee is good for me to get through this meeting, but I also need to sleep tonight, and I have a bigger meeting tomorrow morning. So what would I rather? Would I rather have the energy to get through this meeting, the caffeine energy to get through this meeting, or would I rather, try to, not have a cup of coffee at 4 o'clock in the afternoon so that I can get some sleep and be fresh for tomorrow's meeting, right? So that's a decision that we can make mindfully, right? Or we can just reach for the cup of coffee, down it, and then say, oh man, I forgot about my meeting tomorrow. Now I'm going to be up all night. Shoot, this is going to be tough, right? So the idea then is to make the decisions that are beneficial to us, but making those decisions with that sort of, weighing everything out, right? And again, just like we talked about yesterday, how forgiveness is a moment to moment experience, right? Or a moment to moment sort of course correction, right? Just as life is a moment to moment experience, right? So is this kind of checking in, right? And this kind of, recognition that the decisions that we make, we're making those moment by moment too, right? And that if we can really be aligned and really be present with what's happening and sort of clear out the chaotic, monkey mind that confuses us so much, well, then we can make decisions that are going to benefit us and benefit those around us, right? Without, with minimal drawback to everyone, right? We can make those decisions, or at least when we have to make a decision that is potentially difficult for someone, at least we're doing that with mindfulness and hopefully with some compassion and forgiveness, right? And so one of the main aspects of, one of the things that draws us away from being able to make these decisions, as I mentioned a moment ago, the thing that draws us away from making decisions that serve us, right? And making decisions mindfully. Let's just say that. Let's not even say that it's decisions that necessarily serve us, but let's say just the ability to make decisions mindfully, right? One of the biggest obstacles we have to that, right? The thing that prevents us from making decisions mindfully is the thing that we call the monkey mind, right? And that monkey mind is just when your mind is just bouncing all around. The way we describe the monkey mind is really kind of clever. I've heard this before, heard this a long time ago, I should say, is that, so picture yourself looking at a house. It's a nighttime, right? And you're standing there looking at this big house, right? You're out on the front lawn, you're looking at the big house, right? And there's every light in the house is on, right? So all the windows are completely lit up, and there's no curtains on any of the windows, no shutters, no curtains. It's all just bare, right? And as you stand there, right, you're watching, and there's this monkey in the house, right? And the monkey will pop up on the third floor window, all the way on the right side, and then a second later he pops back down, and then he shows up over here in this other window, and then he pops back down and he disappears, and then he shows up on the ground floor right in the middle, and then he bounces up to this other one and bounces up to this other one. And as you stand there watching, you just see this monkey just pop in and out of each one of these windows just randomly and very quickly, right? That's what's going on in our minds a lot of times, right? We're sitting there, and we're getting all wrapped up in the the sort of, like I say, the chaotic nature of that monkey mind, right? That is just jumping from this thing to that thing to this thing to that thing. What am I gonna have for lunch? What am I gonna have for dinner? Oh gosh, I gotta go get eggs. I didn't buy bread at the store. Do I have enough gas in my car? Who's this calling me? What does anybody like my Facebook post? Has anybody liked it in the last 30 seconds, right? And this is how we're bouncing around all the time, right? And so what happens is when we're in that kind of mind, as I always like to say here on this podcast, life reaches out to interact with us, right? And life reaches out to interact with us in the form of our loved ones wanting to reach out, literally reaching out and asking us questions and saying hello and wanting to talk, right? Life reaches out to us in the form of work, right? Like getting an email from work, right? Like that's life reaching out, right? Life reaches out to you via your needs, right? You got to go and get groceries. You got to go get gas in your car. You got to go do all these different things. That's life is asking you to interact with it. Right? And so when life asks to interact with it, then, we can't interact with it when we're in that chaotic place, or the only way we do react or interact with life when we're in that chaotic place is in a place of reactivity. Right? It's very automatic. Everything becomes very, cause and effect, automatic, boom, 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 boom. And that's when we look back and we say, oh no, I shouldn't have done that thing, or I shouldn't have said that to that person. And oh no, now this whole thing is a big mess. And what did I do here? Right? But it's not something that you did. It's just that you were making, and it's not something that life did to you either, right? Like when we see things that just get messed up, a lot of times it's as simple as we just weren't paying attention when we made the decision. And this is the result of that. Right? And so it doesn't mean that you're a bad person, right? It doesn't mean that you are flawed in any way. All it means is that you were overwhelmed and you were not able to make that decision in a way that was beneficial to you, and now there are consequences to it. Now, unfortunately for most people, what happens is the consequences themselves just become part of that monkey mind. And so the consequences of today, the consequences of today make the decision that we make today the consequences of tomorrow, right? So it's just this loop, this endless feedback loop, right, that results in a lot of negative consequences. And again, then we start to blame ourselves, right? And that's really what I wanted to talk about today, right? That, we talked yesterday about how, again, the, forgiveness being a moment to moment kind of course correction, right? To say like, just because you forgave somebody, yesterday doesn't mean that you don't need to re-forgive them today, right? And a lot of times it is checking in with ourselves and seeing like, okay, is there something that I need to let go of? Is there somebody I need to forgive? Is there something I need to accept? Is there somebody I need to forgive? Right? Like that's kind of the action, right? And it's again, it's on a moment by moment basis that this happens. It's not just, once a day asking yourself. It's not just it's not just once a week or at the top of every hour. It's moment by moment. And that's the way that we can keep that monkey mind from becoming so chaotic, right? When moment by moment, we're simply paying attention to what is happening around us and inside of us, right? Not thinking about all the different stuff, right? And so what that means is that, of course, most people probably sitting here thinking like, well, okay, but one of the things that was in the monkey mind was having to go get groceries. I mean, I still have to go get groceries, right? Yes, you do. And you can plan for that mindfully. Right, so you can take once a week, on the day before you go get groceries, you could take 20 minutes, make that part of your ritual every week, and for 20 minutes you look in the refrigerator and you look in the cabinets and you make a list of the things that you need, and then you don't have to think about it any other time during the week because you've done your work, right? It's not chaotic, it's very simplified, right? And so ironically, I know I talk a lot here about about self-compassion, and I hope you're not getting bored of it because it's a really, really powerful and very, very important practice for us, and it ties right into what we're talking about here, right? Because like I said, so often what happens is, so let's say so let's just go through a process, right? Let's just go through like a little imaginary example, right? So we're having a difficult day, right? There's whatever chaos is going on in our mind, as a friend of mine used to say, drama du jour, right? Like whatever's happening today, that's what's clouding your mind, right? And then all of a sudden you get an email from somebody, right? And it's some person that you weren't expecting to hear from, and it's a work thing, and you're really just annoyed that, oh my gosh, with everything I got going on, this person's emailing me about this silly thing, and so you fire off a thoughtless email right back, and you say, go ask this person, whatever, right? And then you go on in your chaotic day, and you forget all about that email that you sent, and everything's going on and on and on, right? And then a couple of days later, you get a phone call from somebody saying, hey, Joe over in such and such department said that you told him to come check me on this thing, and it's not my job, it's your job, something like that. Of course, I'm coming up with a very silly example, right? But the point is that, in that moment where you could have answered that email in a different way, you answered it in a way that did not serve you. It's not your fault because, again, Joe asked the question in a very inopportune time. The best, solution maybe would have been to just wait for a few minutes before you responded to Joe, but you did the best you could. You didn't mean to screw it up, right? It wasn't something you meant to do. But now, 2 days later, now there's this conflict. There's this drama happening. And now maybe you start thinking like, oh man, I really screwed this up. Like I shouldn't have done that. And yeah, sure, you shouldn't have, but you start to identify with the sort of, the negative aspect of the decision that you made, right? It starts to become Art screwed up instead of, Art made the best decision he could, and this is just the result, so we're just going to have to deal with it, right? Like it could be the kind of thing where like, yeah, man, I really messed up. I shouldn't have done that. And now I feel some shame, right? Or I feel some guilt. And now the problem now, right, is that shame and that guilt, that's part of the monkey mind too, right? And that's part of what prevents you from forgiving somebody or forgiving yourself, right? In that moment-to-moment check-in, you're not able to get there. You're not able to course correct because of the overwhelming monkey mind, that includes the shame and the emotions that are the result of the consequences of the decisions you make, and create further, decisions that are not well thought out, which create further consequences, create more emotion, which create more monkey mind, which on and on and on and on. Right. And you can see how now this, if we protract this out or project this out, we can see how this could make for a really, really difficult life. And that's what it is, right? That's when we say like, gosh, my life is just always so stressful. It's always so difficult. It's always so X, Y, or Z, right? But the reality is that we're making our lives this kind of chaos. We're making the stress, right? Where if we can just pause and we can slow things down a little bit. And again, not slow things down in terms of, we can only do things slowly, right? You can do things quickly without rushing, right? Because when we're rushing, that's when we make mistakes. That's when we make decisions that come back to haunt us, right? And so how does self-compassion come into this? I'm sure you're wondering how I'm going to crowbar my way into this with self-compassion, but it's very easy actually, right? Because, at some point, right, we got to break the cycle. Right? At some point it's got to be I made a bad decision, but I did the best I could. At some point, if that's the way we can start talking to ourselves, then the decisions that we make are going to start becoming more measured and more advantageous, more beneficial to ourselves and those around us, right? And it's also, right, a lot of times what is required in these situations and in the face of these consequences that I talk about, what is required is forgiveness for ourselves, right? And that's a really hard thing for most of us to do. In fact, it's something that most of us feel that we shouldn't do. We feel actively that that is part of the problem, but it's not, folks. Okay, I'm here to tell you that there is abundant and unambiguous research that shows, I mean, you're talking about 15, 20 years worth of research that shows that when we can forgive ourselves, when we can be compassionate to ourselves, when we can be supportive for ourselves, we actually get more done. We actually become more resilient to difficulty. We become more effective and efficacious in our work. We become more connected to ourselves, our own emotions, to all the emotions of those around us. Meaning, we develop more empathy, and of course, as we treat ourselves, is how we wind up treating others, right? And that's the same thing. It's the same way in which the way people talked to you when you were a child became the way you talk to yourself, right? Because right now, what we have is ourself. Like that's we are the center of our universe. Right? Like there's no getting around that, right? The world happens to me, right? The world also happens to you, but I don't experience the world happening to you. I experience the world happening to me. So at any given time, I am at the very center of my own universe. And so therefore, the way that I handle myself is the way that I handle the universe. And so if I beat myself up every day and tell myself, "Oh my gosh, you just keep making these bad decisions. What's wrong with you? Why do you not how come you can't be better?" and things like this that are not helpful, right? If I talk to myself in those kind of hard and even mean and cruel ways, right? Well, then I'm only going to make more of those poor decisions. More of those, difficulties are going to come up. More of the conflict, more of the stress, more of the drama is going to happen, right? But if I can support myself and I can say, yeah, you know what? This is really hard right now. This what we're going through right now, this day, this hour, this meeting, this event in our life, whatever it is, this is really hard right now, right? But at the same time, it's hard for everyone right now. This is not just me, right? This is, and if you took anybody else and put them in my position, they would be having a hard time too, right? And now, what's the next step? The next step is simply to say, you know what? I see you're doing the best you can. I see it, right? I see that you're doing the best you can. And that's good enough. It has to be good enough because it's all you have. And if you're giving all you have, then you should be commended. You shouldn't be blamed for anything. And then but once we realize that we are giving all we have, then we forgive ourselves for any mistakes that we've made or misdeeds that we've committed. Maybe we did something that we're not proud of doing because of the pressure we were feeling, right? Forgiving ourselves for that, right, allows us now to come back to this moment. It allows us to course correct and say, okay, yeah, so why is it that it's, like I'm doing the best I can, but yet that still doesn't seem to be good enough? So that doesn't mean that I have to somehow become better. What it means is I have to examine what's going on here. And in that clarity of my mind, I can examine that. I can say something like, you know what? This is really the job of two people. This isn't the job just for me. Nobody could do this. And so I can forgive myself for that. And in that forgiveness comes the clarity to say, why don't I speak with my supervisor about getting help on this? Because there's no shame in asking for help, because clearly I'm a talented person and I'm doing this, and I've been doing this for a long time. I'm capable of doing this job, but yet this is too much for me. So in that place of self-compassion, in that place of self-forgiveness, I can walk into somebody's office with my head held high and say, hey, this is just too much for me. And of course, it doesn't just have to be work, right? This could also be parenting, right? This could be a moment where you say, you know what? There's no parent in the world who could handle this situation any better than I am right now. And so what can I do to change the situation to make it even easier, to make it more available to me, to make that ability to handle this more available to me? What can I do? Right? But oftentimes that's not the question we ask ourselves. We don't ask ourselves the question. Like I was just talking to a very wonderful client of mine just a few minutes ago, actually, and she was doing some work in the garden today, and I used the example that, and this is, again, I'm saying these things because this is what I've told myself for years, right? You look at, you got all these plants to get in the ground today, and it's got to happen today, and if it doesn't happen today, then I'm a failure. Right? That's usually the way we approach things. But we don't ever say, okay, given the fact that it's 90 degrees today, given the fact that I've got all these other things going on in my life, given the fact that I'm my age, my experience level, my capability levels of doing this gardening thing, whatever it is, given all of that, how many of these plants could I reasonably expect to get in the ground today? See how that's a much different question? Right? Most of the time it's like, well, I got all 20 of these plants. It's got to happen. Let's get to work. We got a lot to do. We'll push ourselves until it gets done. And we got heat stroke by the middle of the day, right? It doesn't have to always happen. So maybe the half the plants stay in their nursery pots for one more day. It's going to be okay, right? And so this is something that literally we just talked through. But you see the difference, though, when we can ask ourselves, wait a second, in order for me to do this with the comfort and ease that I deserve, how many can I reasonably expect to get in today? And so let me do that. And if I don't get that many in, then automatically, if I'm in the practice of self-compassion, then automatically, if I don't get them all in, I'm going to say, I wonder what factor led to my estimate being off. Because I thought I could do 10, but I was only able to do 8. I wonder why. Instead of saying, you failed again, Art. You had 10 plants to get in there. You said you were going to do 10 plants and you didn't do 10 plants. You stink. Right? It doesn't have to be that way. And so I invite you to practice this. And that's the thing. Just like all of everything I talk about here, right? It's a practice. It's not something, because again, the way that you talk to yourself, that inner dialogue, that automatic way of saying, like, you failed here, you dropped the ball, you need to do better, right? When we tell ourselves that, it's because of how we've been conditioned and programmed to talk to ourselves. It's not your fault. And so just that requires some compassion. And you deserve that compassion. You all deserve that compassion. You, yes, you. And so I invite you, but the only way that we can get this compassion is to practice it. So I invite you, literally every single morning, I want you to wake up and say to yourself, first thing in the morning, I want you to say to yourself that, you know what? Life is hard. And if it's very hard for you right now, then say, you know what I'm going through right now, this is really hard for me. I am suffering right now. I am struggling. This is hard, right? Just take a moment and say that to yourself. And then say, and this is really important, this follow-up, okay? Then say, anybody else in my position would be having a hard time too. Anybody else with my level of experience, my level of understanding, my level of energy, my level of everything, Anybody else like me in this position would be having a hard time too. And in fact, there's probably millions of other people in the world who are having a hard time that is very similar to what I'm going through right now. Just doing that, connecting to humanity through this suffering, right, is going to give you a sense of ease. And then the next step is simply to talk to yourself as though you were talking to somebody else who just told you they were having a hard time. What would you say to somebody? Say that to yourself. Honestly, I really encourage you to do that every single morning. Do that every morning for a week and then see how it feels and tell me how it feels. Email me. Let me know how it feels. Okay? And of course, in the description below, there is a link. If you want to talk to me one-on-one, you already own a coaching session. It's got your name on it. All you got to do is claim it. And you do that with the link below. Okay, it's free. It's already yours. And it's going to help. It's going to be a wonderful way to spend 45 minutes. All you got to do is click the link below and claim your spot. All right, everybody. I wish you well. I'll be back in tomorrow. Take care. And please, please wish yourself some compassion because you really do deserve it. All right, take care, everybody. Bye-bye.